Imagine being sentenced to a prison term, not just fighting the system but also the unseen world of prison gangs. Picture this: a former inmate, let's call him John. Day one behind bars, John quickly learns that survival isn't just about serving time. It's about navigating a complex, treacherous underworld, a society within a society, ruled by prison gangs. These aren't your run-of-the-mill troublemakers. They're organized, ruthless, exercising influence that extends far beyond the prison walls. They control illicit trade, enforce their own brand of law and order, and command loyalty, often through fear and violence. Outside, they manipulate systems, pulling strings from the inside, their reach seeping into our everyday world. It's like a chess game but with higher stakes, and the pawns are human lives. Unseen, unheard, but very real. This is the reality for many prisoners across the globe, a fight within a fight, an unseen war. The roots of prison gangs can be traced back to the mid-20th century. In the tumultuous era of the 1950s and 1960s, the first prison gangs began to form. It was a time of societal upheaval, with the civil rights movement and counterculture revolution shaping the world outside prison walls. Inside, the inmates were not immune to these changes. They began to band together, initially for mutual protection and survival. The prison environment was, and still is, a harsh and violent place. In such an environment, there was safety in numbers. As these groups grew, they started to adopt a more organized structure. They developed their own codes of conduct, hierarchies, and even initiation rituals. This was the birth of the first prison gangs. Two of the most notable gangs that emerged during this period were the Mexican Mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood. The Mexican Mafia, also known as La M, was formed in the late 1950s by 13 Hispanic convicts at the Doyle Vocational Institution in California. They initially banded together to protect themselves from other inmates but evolved into a highly organized criminal enterprise. Around the same time, the Aryan Brotherhood was taking shape. Formed in San Quentin State Prison in California, the Aryan Brotherhood was initially a white supremacist group created to protect white inmates from other racial groups. However, like the Mexican Mafia, they quickly evolved into a sophisticated criminal organization. These gangs were not just about protection, they were about power, control, and profit. They began to run illegal activities within the prison system, ranging from drug trafficking to extortion. What started as a survival strategy quickly morphed into a criminal empire. These were the pioneers, setting a dangerous precedent for what was to come. The formation of these gangs marked the beginning of a new era in the prison system, an era characterized by organized crime, violence, and a constant struggle for power. From the confines of a few prisons, these gangs began to spread like wildfire. As pressure and violence escalated within the prison walls, the influence of these gangs began to seep out. Like a virus, they spread from one institution to another, crossing state lines, infiltrating federal prisons, and even reaching foreign lands. Just like any organism, these gangs had to adapt to their new environments. And adapt they did. They grew in strength and numbers, developing sophisticated structures and hierarchies that mirrored those of military organizations or multinational corporations. They established codes of conduct, systems of communication, and even their own economies, built on smuggling, extortion, and other illicit activities. As they spread, new groups began to emerge, each one unique in its formation and purpose. Among them, the Black Guerrilla family, founded in the late 60s in California. Originally formed as a black liberation movement within the prison system, the group quickly evolved into a criminal organization involved in drug trafficking, robbery, and murder. Then there's the Nuestra Familia, born out of the California prison system in the late 60s. This group was founded as a mutual protection society for rural northern Mexican American inmates against the Mexican Mafia, a rival gang based in Southern California. Over time, the Nuestra Familia expanded its operations outside the prison walls, becoming heavily involved in drug trafficking and other organized crime activities. These new gangs, and many others like them, added fuel to the fire, escalating the level of violence and crime within the prison system. They also began to exert influence beyond the prison walls, building criminal networks in the outside world, and affecting communities far and wide. The prison system, once a place of punishment and rehabilitation, had become a breeding ground for organized crime. It was no longer just about serving time, it was about survival, power, and control. The prison gangs had evolved, and they were here to stay. The prison system was now a breeding ground for organized crime. These gangs didn't just exist, they thrived, wielding power both inside and outside the prison walls. They didn't merely survive, they became dominant entities in the underworld, their influence seeping through the bars and out into the streets. Imagine a society within a society, a kingdom within a fortress. The prison gangs became just that. They created their own hierarchy, their own rules, and they enforced them with an iron fist. Inmates who didn't belong to a gang were often left with two choices: join or suffer. The gangs provided protection, resources, and a sense of belonging in a world that was otherwise cold and unforgiving. But their influence didn't stop there. They started to manipulate the prison system itself. Through fear and intimidation, they could control other inmates and in some cases even the prison staff. They used this power to gain privileges, smuggle contraband, and maintain their operations. Outside the prison walls, their reach was even more profound. They became deeply involved in drug trafficking, using their networks to distribute illegal substances far and wide. They also engaged in extortion, demanding money from businesses and individuals under threat of violence. Their activities fueled crime rates and instilled fear in communities. The gangs became adept at violence, using it as a tool for control and enforcement. They instigated riots, carried out hits, and weren't afraid to spill blood if it served their purpose. Their brutality was not just a show of strength, but a message to anyone who dared to cross them. As they grew in power, they started to resemble organized crime syndicates more than just groups of incarcerated individuals. They had a structure, a mission, and an insatiable hunger for power and control. They were no longer just groups of prisoners, they were organized, powerful, and deadly. Fast forward to today, and the situation hasn't improved much. Prison gangs, once a subculture behind bars, have now become an undeniable reality within the prison system. These groups, with their intricate hierarchies and codes, continue to exert a considerable influence on prison life. The impact of these gangs is far-reaching. They affect not only the lives of inmates but also the overall functioning of the prison system. Their activities include drug trafficking, extortion, and violence, disrupting the order inside the walls and putting a strain on the resources of the prison system. Efforts to curb the influence of these gangs have been a mixed bag. There have been both successful and unsuccessful attempts at dismantling these groups. In some cases, prison officials have managed to isolate key members, reducing their influence. However, this often leads to power vacuums, which can result in even more violence as others vie for control. In other cases, attempts to break up these gangs have simply driven their activities underground. They've adapted, becoming more covert in their operations, making it even more challenging to monitor and control their activities. Programs aimed at rehabilitating gang members have also seen varying degrees of success. While some individuals have managed to break free from the gang culture, the majority remain entangled in it, often due to a lack of viable alternatives. Moreover, the influence of these gangs isn't confined to the prison walls. They have networks that extend beyond prison, impacting communities and contributing to cycles of crime and incarceration. And while strides have been made in understanding the dynamics of prison gangs, there's still a long way to go in effectively addressing this issue. Their persistence underscores the need for a comprehensive approach, one that goes beyond punitive measures and addresses the root causes of gang formation and recruitment. Prison gangs are a stark reminder of the challenges our prison system faces even today. The rise of prison gangs is a tale of power, survival, and influence. Born out of a need for protection and survival, these gangs have become a formidable force, not just behind bars, but beyond them as well. From their humble beginnings, they have evolved, spread, and solidified their presence in prisons across the globe. Their power is undeniable, the reach of their influence astonishing. They've built an intricate network both inside and outside prisons, affecting lives and communities at large. Today, their impact is felt far beyond the cold, hard walls that contain them, seeping into society and influencing actions and decisions in unexpected ways. This journey through the rise of prison gangs has been a revelation of the unseen world behind bars, a world that thrives on power, survival, and influence. As we continue to combat crime, we must also address its roots, even if they lie behind prison walls.